Okay, we're diving into our audiometric testing. This is where we go in. You've probably seen this before. You go into the doctor and they have you sit in this soundproof room and it's very eerie, right? I went skydiving once and it was very eerie once I opened the chute because it was so quiet. You couldn't hear anything from the ground. I did it from 14,000 feet. So opening the chute, there's nothing up there. There's no planes, there's no birds. You know, it's just you and the wind. And it was very silent. There wasn't much noise going on at all. And it's very strange because you just feel like you're lost. And so the same type of thing goes when you go into these audiometric testing. It's so quiet. It's below that 30 decibels that you're trying to hear anything and you can't. So the idea is you're going to go in for a baseline. And so the baseline is your very first audiometric exam, and you need to hold on to this, right? So we'll talk about access to medical records coming up, but your baseline is where we want to see how you came into the workforce, how you came into the workplace, and what your hearing was at that point, right? So there's, again, a lot of people will think that aging is the #1 cause of hearing loss, but that's incorrect. It's actually the third. The first is loud noises, the second is medication, and the third is aging. So if you are in a nice, calm, quiet environment your entire life, the likelihood that you have hearing loss is basically down to zero. It's these loud exposures, it's the medications, it's all the things that we do to our body. So when we look at the baseline, let's say I'm 25 years old, I come in, I start working, and I know that I'm going to be exposed to hearing. They send me off, they put me in the hearing protection program, they send me off to the doctor, and they do my baseline. And they show that my baseline, on this frequency, I actually can only hear this at 110 decibels. So I have hearing loss already. So now when I look at the exposures over the next years, has it shifted on this frequency? You know, frequencies, now we got to look at frequencies and all that. But the bottom line is we have a baseline. It tells us what we were hearing at from the get-go, right? So it's like when you go and you start working out at the gym. What's your baseline? How many jumping jacks can you do? How many push-ups can you do? Did we get better or did we get worse? And so we already know it's hearing loss. We're probably not going to get better, probably going to get worse. And we have what we call a 10 decibel threshold shift that Cal OSHA looks at actual loss. So according to what we see out there among all populations, there will be some decrease in our hearing over time based on all these factors. So the first thing you want to get done is your baseline is going to tell you what frequencies you can hear at what decibel level, and that's going to tell us how well we hear. So what's that sound like? Well, usually what they do, they don't do it with these, but we kind of do it with these for our demonstration and example. So you all know what these are. These are tuning forks. They produce a particular frequency. That frequency then is what we try to hear, and we try to hear it at different decibel levels. So the louder we have to make it, the more hearing loss we have. Remember, we can't hear at a particular decibel level, so we got to turn the volume up, we got to turn the amplitude up in order for us to hear it. So if I were to hit it like this, it produces the same frequency. Can you hear it? Probably not. So if I get it close to the microphone, you probably can hear that now. You can hear the frequency very close. If I go to a different tuning fork, different length, different thickness, it produces a different frequency. You should be able to hear that. Oh, I hit my ear on it. And let's just try this big fat one here, see how thick that is. So they have a computer that's going to do that for you, that it's going to play the different tones at the different frequencies, and then it's going to map it all out. We'll put that example on the screen so you can see it. But the bottom line there is that you get the baseline, and then we know we do that same test annually. And then when we do our annual, that's when we can determine whether or not we've had hearing loss based on where that is. Now, before you go in for your audiometric, you should see the doc and have them clean your ears. Remember what we talked about. We talked about that conductive hearing loss where we get too much earwax and this and that. We've had impacts to the eardrum, right? We have things lodged in there, dirt and debris. We need to clean our ears before we go in for our audiometric testing, whether it's the baseline or the annual. And if your doctor, when they conduct your audiometric, does not check your ears to make sure that they were cleaned prior to coming in, don't do the test. You're going to get a false reading. Let me repeat that. Clean your ears or don't do the test, you will get a false reading, meaning it's going to be off a little bit. So every year after you go into our hearing protection, our hearing conservation program, you're going to need to do an audiometric examination. And this is where, again, we did just what we talked about, which is they're going to play the tunes and you're going to listen for them and determine at what volume you can hear those.